Genealogy tells us that we will inherit half of our genes from each parent, and we should inherit 1/4 from each grandparent, 1/8 from each great-grandparent, 1/16 from each great-great-grandparent, etc. However, in reality, chromosomes are spliced from generation to generation, and the proportion of that is different. It's not equal, except for the case of your parents. Of the 1/4 of each grandparent you inherit, it's not going to be evenly distributed. If 1/4 makes up 100% of the 4 grandparents, you might only get 10% from your mom's mom and 90% from the other 3 grandparents. Let's say you have a child. Now, your mom's mom is considered their great-grandparent, where they should theoretically inherit 1/8 or 12.5% of their total DNA. But because you inherited only 10% of your mom's DNA, that's all your kid has to work with. So of that 10%, how much will your child extract? It could be the full 10%, but probably less, and it depends on how the chromosome is spliced. And if it's less, then their child could receive even less as well. On the other hand, of the other percentages from your other grandparents you inherited, your child might inherit near intact copies of them. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. Here on Mortal Faces, I untangle family trees and talk a little bit about them, and in this video we'll be talking about how your DNA will eventually become extinct and how you are not related to your ancestors. So let's get started. Thank you for watching, subscribe for more trees, and let me know in the comments who you want to see next. The more generations you go into the future, the smaller that 10% in our scenario becomes. Eventually, it will become so small that the chance of it being picked up in a splice to be passed to the next generation diminishes. And eventually, it doesn't get picked up at all and it dies out. It becomes extinct. And this is inevitable for all the DNA that is within us. Let's talk about cultures and give an example. If you have a great-great-grandmother, Marcia, who has 100% Spanish DNA, married your great-great-grandfather, Greg, who is 100% Japanese. Their child, who would be your great-grandfather, would be 50% Spanish and 50% Japanese, because children inherit 50% of their parents guaranteed. Beyond that is when the dice are rolled. You, as the great-great-grandchild of Marcia and Greg, might expect to have 1/16 Spanish and 1/16 Japanese DNA, or about 6% of each. But that's in a perfect scenario. The reality is, because DNA you receive is random, Marcia's DNA will be passed down as 50% to her child, and of that 50%, her grandchild Cindy could inherit 5% of that. And the rest of Cindy's DNA would come from Greg and the other 2 grandparents. So Cindy now is your grandmother, who has only 5% of Marcia's DNA. Cindy now has a child who inherits 50% of her DNA and 50% of her husband's. In other words, 50% of Cindy's DNA is also lost. So Cindy has a kid who is your mother, and of that 50% your mother inherits, Marcia's portion is not in that. It's made up of Greg and the other ancestors. Marcia became extinct genetically within your mom. So you're born, and even though your great-great-grandmother was Spanish, you have no Spanish DNA in your body. On the other hand, let's say Cindy has another child. The rule is 2 siblings will not inherit the same DNA makeup from the parents. The 50% makeup will always be different unless you're identical twins. So even though your parent does not have Marcia's gene, her sister actually inherited 1/5 of the 5% DNA Cindy inherited from Marcia. So while your mom has no Spanish DNA, her sister has a sliver. So her sister is technically part Spanish, but your mom and thus you are not. After 10 generations, you have 1,024 ancestors, but only 757 splices of DNA within your body. The difference between 1,024 and 757 means that 267 of those ancestors haven't given you any genes. The situation gets much worse after 15 to 20 generations. If you have a famous ancestor 400 or more years ago, you probably won't have any genes from that person. Or take the year 1650, when the first English colonies began to be established in America. you have 32,768 genealogical ancestors, but only 1,112 genetic ancestors. This means over less than 400 years, 97% of your ancestors contribute nothing to your genetics. The same goes in the opposite direction. In 400 years, you have only a 3% chance of being inherited by your distant offspring unless you are someone's direct maternal or paternal ancestors, as those can be traced by the Y chromosome from father to father and the mitochondrial DNA from mother to mother. However, soon your DNA would appear only in slivers so tiny it would be too difficult to determine if you or some other ancestor made that contribution. Your genealogy as reconstructed from historical records is not the same as your genetic inheritance. Yet even if the genealogies are accurate, King Charles III of England, for example, most certainly inherited no DNA from William of Normandy, who conquered England in 1066 and who is believed to be his ancestor 25 generations back in time. So within a very short time, we are born from an anonymous string of humanity that individually shapes our recent ancestors and gives rise to us. We then only exist in a short time to strongly shape a few generations of our descendants, and then our contribution dissipates into the cosmos of the next humanity. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. You can check out my other video on the pedigree collapse and how we are all a product of inbreeding. I have lots more videos on my channel, Family Trees. Subscribe for more videos. Each of your subscriptions helps how this channel grow. It allows me to continue making more content for you. Let me know in the comments who you want to see next. I do make a list of all your suggestions, and I will see you in the next one.